situations in many countries, societal, and somehow I felt it might be a good joke or offending the audience to introduce Professor Kamali. Everybody is aware of Professor Kamali, and there is no need and no point in reading out what all you have achieved and what all you have given to the world in your lifetime. Let me say this much, perhaps. I think all of us are deeply indebted to you, Professor Kamali, for the many writings and books and insights you have produced and given to the world on Islam, one of the major reference and sources to understand better Islam. I only wish it was not only in English and a local language, but also in German, because there are many Germans who should know more about Islam. So I hope for translations into other languages also. Whoever meets Professor Kamali for the first time is immediately struck by your kindness and your wisdom and all you are in the world. So thank you. We listen out to you.
System of rule. Islam is not a rule of democracy. It's government by theocracy means government by the religious leaders, those who represent God and claim to represent God, those who maybe have the authority to pardon sins and so on, like the popes in the Middle Ages, the Christian pope. Those authorities do not exist in the Islamic vision of government. Al-Qaradawi, a prominent jurist, said, "Hiya dawla madaniya." It is a civilian state, simply because the head of state is an elected figure that enjoys the trust of the community. It comes to designated into office through consultation and through bay'ah. Bay'ah is pledge of allegiance. I recognize your authority, and that is equivalent to a vote. That the head of state is accountable to the community to the extent that if he violates the terms of his trust, it's the people who have the authority to depose him, to sack him. The people are again entitled to give him advice when he falls into error. I have quoted Hassan Turabi saying there is no theocracy in Islam. Government in Islam is not the government of ulama. It is not the government of only men either, men and women. And he said that the fourth Caliph Osman, in the election of the fourth Caliph Osman, women also participated. This was in the early 4 decades of Islam. We have further evidence in what is known as a historical document, the Constitution of Medina, which was signed by the Prophet when he came to Medina, between Muslims, the immigrants and the helpers, Muhajirun and Ansar, in the Jewish community at that time who were present in Medina. And this document, the Constitution, the earliest in history that we have, talks about the authority of the leader and the limits of state authority, commitment to justice, to equality, to crime prevention, responsibility of the major components of that document. The tribal leaders, other in war and peace, and a number of other subjects. When you look at it, these are civilian themes. It doesn't talk about religion. It's these commitments to people's agenda. We have this characterization, as I've discovered, that Islam stands for the civilian state, not a theocracy. We have seen some development after the Islamic Republic of Iran, because of the personality of Ayatollah Khomeini in the doctrine of the guardianship of the jurist Wilayat-e-Faqih, it gave the impression of a theological state. But in reality, Qaradawi, Mutawalli, both state is not really theological. In fact, if you look at none of the leaders of after Khomeini, of Iranian leaders, have claimed any theocratic status. In fact, the parliament, as we are told, sometimes they have dismissed seven or eight ministers through vote of non-confidence. If you look at the history of election, Iran actually has a better record of democratic election than many other Arab and Middle East and other states. The theory of the Shia theory of Wilayat-e-Faqih originates in a theological position. The Imam, the Shiite Imam, or the descendants of the Prophet, the 12 Imams, the last Imam died in 874, over 1,000 years ago. After that, the mantle of leadership was carried by the deputies of the Imam. These are the ulama and the Shia ulama. And Khomeini merely said that these are the guardianship of the jurist. The jurist now is the carrier of the duties of the Imam. Later, another Shia leader of Lebanon, Mahdi Shamsuddin, he changed his doctrine. After the death of the last Shia Imam, the authority of leadership transferred back to the Ummah, not just to the ulama or to the jurists. And he came up with the idea of Wilayat al-Ummah, the authority of the community. That is the locus of political authority. And if we accept this version of political structure of the state, then it is direct equation in unity between the Sunni vision of the state and between the Shia. And I then know that it is a qualified democracy. Why we say that? I said democracy stands for an inherent worth of human beings, representative government, rule of law, equality, accountability. If you look into the details, the Sharia Islam stands for all of these values. There is a substantive harmony between what we read in the lines of Islamic guidance of government and the democratic principles of commitment.
The verse clearly says, إِنَّ الدِّينَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الْإِسْلَامِ فَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. I will translate. The verse clearly says that the religion accepted by God is Islam. Whoever takes a religion other than Islam will not be accepted from him, and on the day of judgment, he will be amongst the losers. Now this is in the Quran, you can read this quite clearly. Hence, this concept of moral autonomy, this concept of outright liberalism, etc., will not carry, and the Quran nor the Hadith will hold this.
We were advocating the plausibility of separation of powers from an Islamic perspective. Now in many religiously inspired systems, this is often a problem, and because there is always a tension between the fear for absolute power on the one hand, but also the fear for loss of the truth that may be the case when there is separation of powers on the other hand. Now how will you bring those two things together?
Repeat that question again on separation of powers. I'm sorry, the mic was not so clear.
Yes, often, let's say, feared by systems inspired on religion, because they think that as a result of that, the truth may get lost. So you combat maybe effectively absolute power of leaders, but on the other hand, the price we have to pay for it.
The question was so heavy, I think you better tackle it.
Okay. I'll I've discussed the two verses that you mentioned in the Dina in Allah and Islam, the religion in the eyes of God is Islam only. And the other two, وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي other غير الإسلام فلن يقبل منه. One who follows a religion other than Islam, God will not accept. Now this is, I've written in my section on freedom of religion. Islam has two meanings. One is the name of a religion that we know. And the other is Islam in the sense of submission to a supreme being. That is the affirmation of the truth of a creator. And the Mufassirun, especially in recent decades, have discussed this. And there is fresh light that if you put this in context with 3-4 other ayahs that I have quoted, whether you are Jews or Christians or followers of other religions, if you profess a deen, the deen of Allah, then you are delivered, you are saved. If you put it, see it side by side with those other verses, I think it is an equally correct reading of those two verses. And the Mufassirun have actually tried to suppress the essence of freedom of religion by offering restrictive comments. There are 6-7 verses in the Quran advocating freedom. There are 1 or 2 who said, okay, God likes Islam. Are you taking the cue here to suppress the essence of freedom of religion? That is my comment on that question. You say secularism. I take my cue from secularism and advocate this libertarian idea. I say Islam is secular because Islam is not talking only about the affairs of the hereafter or only about worship. Islam talks about justice, about the affairs of this world, about how we treat people, relations among human beings. Islam claims to be, to claim the kind of a time sort of, that it is good for all time, because the Quran has in it, the greater part of the Quran is am as opposed to khas. It is general as opposed to specific. The specific verses in parts of the Quran are about 3 or 4%. The rest is devoted to general guidelines that tells you are committed to justice. Your accountability is only for a crime you commit, that you must treat an offense. The punishment must be proportionate to the crime. And there is this commitment to general values, and I have written about those. That now you are seeing a number of guidelines in the Quran that if you say that, okay, we phrase it in history, and we only accept the medieval interpretations of the Quran and suppress the parts that we can get some fresh light from. I think that if you may charge me as secularism and so on, yes, speak of some parts of secularism are advocated. In fact, within the Sharia, the court of justice, our system of justice is essentially positivist. If you can bring a case to the court, you have to prove it. The system of evidence and proof is not compromised by the element of what religion you follow. It is a positivist approach. You call it a secular approach to justice. I would say that because Islam regulates the affair of this religion, don't blame everything because this is a secularist interpretation. No, we accept that part of secularism that tell us the affairs of this world are best judged and managed in this particular way that addresses and focuses on the issue and not necessarily bring and put religion next to it as an additional interpretation. Of course,